Hey, Randy here. Thank you for clicking into the sermon for this week. I hope we can be a benefit or a blessing to you as you watch and listen. And our prayer is that Jesus would become more real to you than ever before. God bless you.
We've entered into the Christmas season, and usually we kind of move to a 4-week series because of the things going on in the merger and the meetings and all of that. We kind of had to postpone, and so this will be one of 3 weeks instead of one of 4 weeks. And one of the challenges as a Christian and as a church is to keep our attention focused on what the meaning of this season is. That's not a new concept, right? And no matter how long you've known Jesus, we still need reminders. And most of us understand unequivocally that the season is not about gifts or even family or children. But I don't know if we totally understand what it does mean or what it does represent. This season of Advent, and the word Advent is derived from the Latin word Adventus, and it means coming. And so in the 6th century, Roman Christians had tied Advent to the coming of Christ. But the coming that they had in mind was not Christ's first coming in Bethlehem as the Messiah, but rather his second coming in the clouds. And the early church, when you saw passages of Scripture that had to do with keep your eyes open, be aware, be alert, the Messiah is returning, you could not have found a Christian anywhere that didn't believe that Jesus was coming in their lifetime. That was their hope. That was their expectation. So when Jesus said, "I will be back," they literally thought any minute. One of my favorite bumper stickers is, "Jesus is coming back soon, look busy." And I think for now centuries, that's been the motto, is Jesus is coming back soon. Beware, be alert, know that's coming. And so when we think about the coming of Christ, it struck me that before we can reflect on the meaning of his coming, we must first determine if there's a need for him coming. If I was to speak this entire message on the profound event that is yet to come, that Christ is coming again, the danger, even the temptation, is to not understand exactly why that's important. I'll give you an example. I had a friend who lived roughly 55th Street in Bell. Pretty homes there up against the canal. And one day he was mowing the grass or something, and he looked and a neighbor's dog, got hit by a car. And the car kept going, and the dog lay in the road suffering. He ran out. And in the process of helping the dog, he reached down and the dog bit him badly. And so what happened after that, I'm not really sure. All I know is that they took him to Mayo, which was right there at 56 and 101, and they stitched him up, and it was pretty bad. The tetanus shots and things were bad. And my mind goes to that story for this reason. That when we speak of, or when I speak of the return of Christ, and I speak of the need that our Savior is yet to come, there's almost an attitude, at least with me, it's worse than a cavalier attitude. It's one of, I don't know if I really need that. I mean, the life that I lead is pretty good. And I don't know if I need him in that respect. Of course, when you're single, and I remember when I was single and 20, 21, 22, and I was just every night just praying that Jesus would not return until I got married. That's all I cared about. And now that I've been married 32 years, I still pray the same thing. I'm just so happily married, and she's perfect. And anyway, so why is it so important? You know the other question I'd ask? Why don't I long for his coming? Is my relationship with God one that provokes within me a constant, more than daily, a constant understanding and longing for him to come and to remove us and rescue us from this world? And I think that I've spent more time trying to make this home equivalent to the eternal comfort of my heavenly home, that I forget about the real home that he will come and rescue me from and provide for me. And sometimes in my life, that I look at the things that are keeping me from experiencing a deep joy, even purpose. And I get lost in those things. And it sidetracks me, to be honest with you. It distracts me. And I forget that there will be a day that I will be in his presence. And those that have gone before me will be present. And it's at this time, this Advent season, where the first 2 weeks we usually look at the coming of Christ, and then the second 2 weeks, third and fourth, we typically, as we enter into Christmas, is we look at the coming of Christ as the Messiah in Bethlehem 2,000 years ago. I was in a very active youth group as a kiddo. That's why I think I became a youth pastor for so many years, and why I think it's so important for this church as well, because it played a huge role in my life. Some of you were involved in youth groups as well and can speak to the same scenario. And I remember one of our youth workers, she didn't say much, but this one particular day, and we were sitting around, whether it was a Bible study or lunch, I can't remember, and she said, "I'm just homesick." And I thought, "We're in your house." She said, "Oh no." She said, "The older I get, the more of those folks that I love have gone ahead of me in our home. And it's more that my mind and eyes get on that home and removed from this home." How many of you can name a family member or a close friend who's gone home and you're stuck here and your heart longs for that day to meet up again? Let me see your hands. Amen. It's real. And the older we get, not necessarily the closer we know Jesus. Sometimes I think it's the other way around. The older we get and the more friends and family we send ahead, the more perspective I get of how short this life is. And quite honestly, how insignificant it is. And I think about the things when I was younger, even newly married. I remember, this is a little embarrassing, I remember first married where pagers came And I just thought, how cool. I need a pager. It'll make me so happy. And so I got a pager. There's one problem with the pager. No one paged me. So I would sit at my desk, paging myself, wondering if it worked. I remember the first page I got, I looked on it, yes, I dialed, went to my office, and ran real fast, and oh, it was a wrong number. So you get older and you make a little more money, and so pagers become cell phones, which become cars, which becomes houses, which becomes cabins at the ocean, becomes cruises in Europe, and becomes eventually a trip to Mars with Musk or something. And so we continually put our eyes and our hope and our longings to things that have no lasting value. Hebrews 1:2 says this, but in these last days, isn't that interesting? The writer says, in these the last days, this was written 2,000 years ago. He has spoken to us by his Son, whom he appointed heir of all things, and through him all things were made in the universe. So why do we need Advent? And why is it today that we're concentrating on the eventual return of Christ? Well, you have to go to Genesis chapter 1 to really, you have to really rewind this thing and go all the way back to Genesis chapter 1 to get this picture. It says this, verse 22 to 25, and the rib that the Lord had taken from the man, he made into a woman and brought her to the man. Then the man said, This at last is a bone of my bones and the flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman because she was taken out of man. And therefore a man shall leave his father or his mother, which is interesting, by the way. There was Adam and Eve and no parents. And so God says, therefore, you guys should leave your folks. It's the first time it dawned on me this week as I was reading this. Can you imagine Adam and Eve standing there going, oh, okay, who are they? What is that? But it wasn't for them. It was a message for the rest of us, right? For us today. So he says, therefore a man shall leave his father and mother and hold fast to his wife, and they shall become one. And the man and his wife were both naked, and they weren't ashamed. So they were in a perfect environment. Life was just perfect. They had plenty of food. The animals all got along. You didn't have cats and dogs chasing each other and hating each other. You didn't have kids fighting. Your life was just perfect. Verse 43, something changed. Because in chapter 4, verse 8, we see some drastic change that happened between there and 3 and chapter 4. One chapter, a million things happened. It's this. Cain spoke to Abel, his brother, and when they were in the field, Cain rose up against his brother Abel and killed him. Second generation. Handful of people. And you already have murder. You drop down to verse 6, chapter 6, and it says, and the Lord saw the wickedness of man was great on the earth, and every intent of his thoughts of his heart was only evil continually, scriptures say. Something dreadful and drastic had happened. Man had become sinful. And if we could have stopped the story at the end of this chapter, there would have been really no need for Advent. But sin forever changed the picture, and men and women were sinful by nature. Used to be, I've been doing this 30 years, it used to be convincing someone of their sin or sin in the world was something that you had to discuss for theological reasons and just for kind of get on the same page, but it just didn't take much. And convince someone otherwise, but today it just seems as though, at least to me, that the majority of the world would like to think that there isn't sin, like, at our core. I've listened to preachers online as I'm clicking along and listening and telling their congregation that at their core they're just good people. And I think to myself, he hasn't met me. It's not true. Would you believe me if I told you that the older I get, the more aware I am of not just my sinfulness, but my potential to sin? Would you believe me?
Amen.
I hated it. And I loved it as a kid, even in high school, concrete thinking versus abstract thinking. By the way, parents of teenagers, this is where you live. This is the challenge. At the core of your job as a mom and a dad, parents of junior high, high school, even college, of helping our kiddos understand and grasp that sin in our lives is not couple things that we do through the day. But according to the scriptures, sin has permeated our lives. And I think about the turkey that I'm going to be putting on my smoker for Christmas, and we're putting it in a bucket. Nancy back here, she was explaining to me what I need to be doing to prepare the bird. And so you get a Home Depot bucket. I've got one in the garage that'll work. And then you put the turkey in there, and then you put salt water in there, and then you let it soak. And then you permeate the bird completely. And I said, like, for a day? And she goes, I do it for 3 days. And I'm like, oh, 3 days good, 10 days is better. And so I'm just going to soak this thing. If you come to our house, you may want to just ham, but what I've realized is that awareness of sin is more of a state of mind than understanding and pointing to one thing or two in my life that I recently have done wrong. Your sin affects every area of your life. And if we're not in a constant status of reading the scriptures, becoming aware of our sin, confessing and asking forgiveness, and if we're not in that constant flow, we're just not dealing with things in our lives because it's constant. I go back to old sermons that I find maybe on my shelf, and I think to myself, what was I thinking when I created that outline? And then I started thinking, in 10 years, will I look at these and do the same? That's a scary thought. But the same thing applies to my life. And I think about the things that fueled me as a young parent. And I think about the things that were important to me. And the times that our kids had to have wondered at times, does he care more about that than me? And it would be so easy to live in a state of regret and shame. Except, guess what? The Messiah came and rescued you. Aren't you glad for that? I threw this up here. I think I sat on an ordination council this past week, and I barely passed mine 20 years ago, so why they asked me to sit on it, I have no idea. I don't think they really knew who they were working with. But one of the things that I realized in sitting in this council, and it was a lot of fun, and two great men who knew the Bible and knew systematic, I was so proud of them, great kids. One of the things I realized is that I probably need to incorporate more of it into sermons, because there's certain things in systematic theology that just kind of create a baseline for us. And if we don't have a baseline, then our common sense or our thinking of what it should be can take over, and our theology can go wacky real fast. I get that. And so one of the things that I realize is that not a lot of us understand the depravity of man. And depravity of man, those are big words that mean that all of us are born in sin because of Adam. You sin because you're a sinner. You're not a sinner because you sin. And you say, you just said the same thing. I didn't. It's very different. So we're born in Adam's sin. And even if you could somehow live a perfect life, you were still, through Adam, you have sin. And so the theological term is called the depravity of man. And there's four things that the depravity, this is really important. I know it may sound a little boring, and I'm not doing a good job setting it up. Stay with me. There's four things that you have to understand about the depravity of man. Number one is that unbelieving sinners are always as bad as they could be. It's not the case. There's good people that know nothing of Jesus. They have no connection with a living God at all. And they're just good moral people. And so the truth is that not everyone is as bad as they can be. Number two, that the expression of sinful human nature is always lived out to the fullest. That's not the case. I know in your life and my life, the urges that I might have, I don't follow through with, and that would be the same with the world. If for no other reason, there are policemen. And so there's a set of accountability. And so it's like a little boy in the classroom, and he's a little second grader, and the teacher says, sit down, sit down, sit down, and exhausted, sit down, and finally he says, I'll sit down, but I'm standing up on the inside. You've heard that story, right? Well, sometimes the sin is still there in us, and so the depravity of man says, there's still a rebellious aspect of my life, and so I may be sitting on the outside, but I am standing on the inside. Number three, that unbelievers are incapable of acts of kindness and benevolence and goodwill. That's not the case. I met the person who's the head of all of charity at Safeway in Albertson. So it's a pretty big deal, and they run literally hundreds of thousands of dollars through this department. And basically they ask the question, when you go to Safeway, would you like to donate? And so some of you say yes, $1, $5, whatever. And so you may not even do it for the right reason, but you have enough people that do that. They have an entire department that distributes that money to charitable causes. It's pretty cool. But you don't have to have a relationship with God to do that. Good things can come out of people that don't know God. And number four is that non-Christians cannot appreciate goodness, beauty, honesty, and decency or excellence. So sometimes we get this idea, actually it's kind of a look down our long nose kind of attitude. Like, we're Christians, we know God, we know Jesus, we have Jesus. Like we have the corner on goodness and decency and love. It's just not the case. But total depravity says that permeating through all of us is a sinful, selfish agenda. It's who we are. So what does it mean to be? Well, it's contaminated every aspect, our heart, our mind, our personalities, our emotions, our conscience, our motives, our will. Martin Lloyd-Jones said this, listen to this, man is wrong at the center of his being, and therefore everything is wrong. Now, you really you can't get away with that in most places. But if you're understanding theology and understanding the scriptures and what it says about us, you have to accept that. Doesn't mean that everything you do is wrong, but at the core, there's something wrong. Listen to me. If we don't understand that there's something wrong inside of you and inside of me, the coming of Christ in the future is meaningless. And the more that I grasp that and absorb that, the more I hunger for it. Lord, come quickly.
Amen.
Lord, come quickly. This is not in my notes, but in my mind, I think this. But I think that I spent my life doing a really good job isolating myself from pain, heartache, feeling helpless. Yet I'll tell you this, that every once in a while, something drops in my life and it demands attention. And I can't ignore it. Teen Challenge is filled with men and women at other campuses, filled with folks who were faced with things in their life that demanded their attention, and they refused to face them. And this became their temporary answer. And do you know why I don't throw a rock at them? I'll tell you exactly why. Because you and I, we may not struggle with that. I mean, you may. There may be some folks in this room, statistically that might be the case. But you've also found something to, it's more than medicate. It's to not face the event or pain in your life that causes you to get on your knees and to trust Him. And sometimes in my life, I spend more time thinking about the one thing in my life that I thought if it was different, my whole life would be better and different, instead of the other things that God's trying to teach me in the meantime. Someone asked me the other day, are you excited about the merger? And I said, I'm excited about the opportunities. I'm 100% excited about the opportunities. But it's not answering our problem. You know what our problem is? I just want to reach people with the good news of Jesus. Because this community is filled. You close the door of these homes, and the nice car, and the nice house, and the access to pools, and all the life that we have up here. And there's an emptiness and a pain. I just want people to know Jesus. I really do. In fact, I'll make it super personal. As we approach this holiday, time of joy, just fun, oversaturated turkeys, and just a whole life of just wonderfulness. Some of you are carrying a burden that feels like a boulder. And my first words to you from my heart, I'm sorry. And sometimes I say that and folks go, no, it's not your fault. And I go, no, I know. But I'm allowed to be sorry for you. And I think about Romans chapter 3, verse 10. It says, as is written, there's no one righteous, not one. There's no one who understands. There's no one who seeks God. All have turned away. 6 times Paul says none or not one. Okay, keeps going. He goes, their throats are open graves. Verse 14, their mouths are full of cursing. Verse 15, their feet are swift to shed blood. Verse 16, ruin and misery mark their way. 17, the way of peace. This is really just a joyful passage, isn't it? Just a good Christmas passage for the kids to memorize. And there is no fear of God before their eyes. It's just like Debbie Downer from top to bottom. And the reason why that has to happen in week 1, and the reason why we need this perspective as we enter into the holiday season in Advent, and the reason that has to be something that we just grasp. It's not something that we just check off as we believe. The reason we have to understand it is we have to understand that the things that we are longing for often are not the answers that bring us joy. But that which brings us joy and what we need in our heart is who Christ is, who He is in my life, and my longing or my hope for Him. Jesus is the answer to a lot more questions than we give Him credit for. That's what I'm trying to say. I've never said it like that before. And that was pretty profound, so I didn't see anyone writing that one down, so I think that's not a good one to tell. So this season, what I'm hoping to do is not take my eyes off of presents and put it on family. Family's great. But some of you, your families are a mess right now. And that's not doing you a favor. In fact, that's a little bit of a slap in the face to you. It's not about getting together with friends. You may have just moved here and you don't have a whole lot of friends. You're limited in friends and family and all of those things that we say Christmas is about. You know what it's about? Is that the Messiah came and He's coming again. And instead of looking busy, my recommendation is know it. Know it. That message is in my heart. Can you tell? No, I don't mean that to get built up. I hope you can tell. I hope you know that. This Advent season, this first week, is, for some of you know it, and so all week I wrestled and struggled. Is this what I bring? And so many people know it, but I just felt like we just all needed to get on the same playing field as we go into the season. Family, gifts, time off, and all those things, they're awesome. The church merger and the opportunities that can come along for this awesome group of people is awesome. At the same time, those things all pale to insignificance compared to the hope that I have that Jesus will return.
Amen.